So today, Alex is stepping in as chair. According to the ordinance, we are to select a chair. This is our first meeting of the calendar year. So we will, in March, our first meeting, we will vote on the chair and co-chair at that time.
Do any of the board members have questions about that? We don't need to motion to approve that because that's the standard, right? Okay, cool. Okay, that sounds good. So we will discuss that in March. And then we want to welcome the new appointees. If you would introduce yourself.
Jason Simpson, environmental engineer with the city of Memphis. Glad to be here.
Heather Holtz, I work for the Stormwater Department for the city of Memphis.
Welcome to the board. We're excited to have you. Okay, and we will move to public comment. We have the limit of 10 speakers with a 2-minute limit. Do we have anyone submit for public comment?
We have Sarah Houston. Protect our offer.
Oh, thank you. Good morning. Here we go, testing. All right. Good morning, everybody. Sarah Houston. I serve as Executive Director of Protect Our Aquifer. We've had the pleasure of working with y'all these past few years, but especially these past few months. And so before you all have a letter and a copy of some red line ordinance. Now this is full Article 42 that creates this very board. It also is what gives y'all authority to have construction code for wells and for the septic program. I know there was some question in the last meeting about y'all's authority to approve those septic fees. And there's some discrepancies between the codes and the ordinance. And so in discussions with the health department these past few months, we saw there's a need to kind of clarify that, do some housekeeping. Most of this language was drafted back in the 1980s and hasn't really been touched since. So there are currently 2 fees that are actually named in the ordinance, and I believe that is on page 7. And so what we're recommending is to strike that language as specifies those 2 fees. As you saw last meeting, there were many more fees than that, and just have a very clear statement that the fees for permits are set by the board at a public meeting, and that they can be revised or renewed at minimum every 5 years. And so that's really just trying to make some very clear language at the county level that y'all have that authority, and that then we also just some like cleanupping around Memphis and Shelby County Health Department. It's been the Shelby County Health Department for quite a few years. And then we added every 5 years to the groundwater clause, which is the groundwater protection clause, which I believe is on page 3. So they're pretty straightforward, simple. We've had a discussion with a couple county commissioners, and they are supportive of this and understand that y'all's role is the more technical, detailed stuff. So we're hopeful that we can get y'all's approval on this and we can move this forward through county commission. Thank you so much.
Okay, next we have Carl Richards.
Hi, my name is Carl Richards. I'm chair of the board for Protect Our Aquifer. And here we are pretty close to the end of the year and just sort of reflecting on that. And I want to thank the Groundwater Board and the county staff for some pretty significant steps forward that have been made over the last year. And I think this is a very positive movement, and I want to pat everyone on the back for making some of these moves. As we look into the future, there's some big challenges. I suggest that in 2025, A good thing for the board to be working on is an overall groundwater management plan. We have a tremendous amount of new information that's come from U.S. Geological Survey, from Caesar at the University of Memphis, that's funded through the MLGW monies. Lots of information there. Are we using it? You know, how can that be used, that information, to better shape a groundwater protection plan? And that, it's a challenge. We certainly at POA, we're willing to help with that and provide some guidance on what the tenets of that sort of a plan should be. But I think that's going to be a good challenge into the future if we can make a difference. I just want to point out, you know, there's been a lot of discussion and controversy about the use of water for data centers. Data centers are, you know, they're part of the modern world now. We have some challenges in our region of how to better assist these if they come into our communities to wisely use water rather than using 2,000-year-old groundwater. How can we utilize alternative water sources such as has been spoken about and apparently planned for the XAI facility in terms of reusing wastewater from the city of Memphis. But just something moving forward, these are not going away, and we have to learn how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, protect our
Go to Schaefer Knocker? Schaefer Knocker.
Schaefer Knocker.
Yeah.
All right, I just wanted to speak about the ornamental use of our groundwater resources, and that's basically looking at filling up ponds and recreational ponds on private property. And just make the board realize that every foot of water for 1 acre is 326,000 gallons of water. So if you're trying to fill a 10-foot pond, that's 3.2 million gallons of water. So, and how do you consider that? Is that a reasonable use of our groundwater resources? Most of that will be likely evaporating or infiltrating into the groundwater, whether it's the shallow or if you're in the recharge zone, back into the Memphis. So in saying all of this and the quantities of water, how do we engineer these ponds moving forward to bring more surface water into them so that they are filled by surface water, not our groundwater resources? And also, you know, not meant to pick on the property owner with their well permit today and their appeal. It's just one well, but the historical use of these wells, and there's many dozens, hundreds of wells throughout Shelby County already permitted for the use of this. So how long will it take to shift our thinking on the use of our groundwater resources and, you know, stop our support of water bodies that don't naturally exist throughout West Tennessee? So, thanks.
Okay, thank you all for your comments and for being here. So we will bring up our applicant. See here? Drew Cowan.
Good morning. I'm Drew Cowan. I'm the owner of 600 North Collierville, Arlington. I'm applying for a well permit to supply my house, retain my lake level, and irrigation for my property. I have a 2,200 foot driveway that comes from the street, and that is why I'm applying for a well.
And this was brought up last time, correct? Okay. And so was there a new application filled to reflect the differences?
The new application is in your packet, Mark, new application.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Board members, do you all have questions or thoughts?
I believe last time the question was because retained lake level was not marked, there was a question about how much capacity the well was going to, I'm sorry, I'm probably not saying this correctly, but the capacity of how much water it would need to draw out to retain that lake level. There was a question if the calculation had been done correctly, since when the original application was put in, it wasn't marked for retaining the lake level. And I see here, I believe it's the same, that well capacity. So was that recalculated at all? Was it determined to be?
For the size of the well?
Someone help me out here, because Jason, I don't feel like I'm the.
I think she's talking about the well capacity that's marked at 50 gallons per minute.
Sure.
Yeah.
Was that verified?
It was verified. It's large enough. You know, I have a watershed that fills up the lake, but in order to retain it at full pool, that's where the well would help out and keep in mind lake level at its fullest. And we've stocked the lake with fish, and it's going to be used for recreation for my kids, the fish.
Any other board members?
Just a question. You do have access to MLGW.
I do. But as I said, I'm 2,200 feet from the road. The cost that I got from my plumber was well over $50,000 to run a 3-inch line to my house.
Am I mistaken, or the last time I thought we talked about this, I don't think the lake is done yet. Is that correct?
The lake was built in early March with the levee that basically it's an impoundment that I connected 2 ridges together to form the lake.
And near fish are in there now?
They are. Southeast Pond Management actually stopped it November 25th.
How did y'all get water in there?
It's all been rainwater
Okay.
so far.
So I guess I have a question about that is if so far the rainwater has been able to fill the lake, yeah, I'm just curious why you would need the water to retain the lake.
Well, as you know, with droughts and everything else, you know, the absorption of water, in order to retain your lake level and have it full pool, you have to fill it. You have to have a water source in order to fill it.
Has an engineer verified that?
Yes.
Do you have that on paper somewhere?
No ma'am. That would be RDS, Josh Burnett, my engineer.
Yeah, like Scott pointed out, that's just a ton of water to use from our precious aquifer. So I'm still very concerned about that, at least for the lake use for sure. I understand for house, for residential use, but.
I think it's more, you know, it's not actually filling the lake is what he's doing. I mean, as long as it's filled up, you're just keeping level. I mean, it may be a foot, it may be 6 inches. You know, just want to keep it at a steady level. I mean, I understand what you're saying. You know, if he was just filling it up like a pool every year, draining it, fill it up, that would be a lot of water. It's just in my mind, that's my thought.
That's correct. I mean, that's.
He does fit all he ticks all the boxes. Right.
I do like to hear that, because last meeting it was, I think, the pictures that were shown, it didn't look like it was fully constructed yet, and it seemed like the use was going to be to actually fill the pond up from empty. So to hear that you were able to stock the pond and the rainwater has filled it up significantly enough for fish is good to hear.
Right, and we're into winter season right now, so with rains, I don't see any reason that the water's not just gonna, fill up to full, into spring. Right now, Southeast Pond Management told me there was enough lake to retain my fish and to stock my fish. My fish were stocked, and they're gonna stock the bass in June. So, like I said, I don't think the well will be utilized all the time for filling the lake. It'll just be to retain the lake level we have right here.
I have a question. As I look at the map of your property here, is your house and pond?
That's correct.
Okay, so it appears as though for the map that your watershed flows down to the front of the property. Do I see the drainage there?
There's actually, there's a creek back there, and there's a large hill. I call my property Turkey Hill. And so everything from the hill on the 2/3 of my property, everything slopes back to the east to where that pond is. So the amount of watershed that I had to engineer is actually 5 to 1. It's 5 acres is what I have for my pond that's actually in place. And the proper amount of water you need to retain lake level is 7 to 1 according to the engineer.
Any other questions from the board?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we need to take a vote? Is there a motion to? We do need to take a vote. Okay. Then we'll take a vote. All those who are.
We're upholding the appeal, or we're approving. But MLPW still provide water, and according to ordinance, section 1201, if we can provide, if MLPW can provide water, then you provide.
It's within 3.
And what did you say yours was?
2,200 feet.
Say one more time.
2,200 feet. Probably longer than most driveways here in Shelby County.
So that's why I'm confused, because we still have MLPW saying they can provide water. That's why I'm confused.
So that's based on the topography of it. Normally it is allowed more than the 300 feet or more. That's gonna, if he has to pay $50,000. So that's the reason why he come before the board to see if he would have to use MLGW, or if the board would agree that that amount is a lot, will be a hardship on him. So if he's gonna lose a well for, if his house was in the front or closer, then, but it's not. So with that length, historically, well, it's up to the board to approve whether or not. So that's the reason why it was an automatic denial with us.
Do you have any other questions before we move forward to the vote? Okay. If you support this well continuing to be built, say aye.
Aye.
If you don't, say no. No.
No.
No.
Okay, let's raise hands. The ayes. Okay, and the noes. Okay, the ayes have it. All right. Congratulations, sir.
Thank y'all.
Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it.
Next, we have the letter to municipalities on the agenda. So
All of you received the email regarding the letter to each municipality. The letters were mailed to the mayor, and I do have copies if you all want hard copies. But that's all. Just wanted to touch base on that, and let you all know where we are. Do y'all have any questions?
I might have a lot of questions, but let's go.
Alex?
Okay, sounds good. Is there anything the board needs to do, board members need to follow up on with those letters? I mean, it sounds like the conversation is going to happen.
Reagan, I'll let you
Okay.
answer that.
Okay, so everyone should have gotten the letter that we sent out. It was a draft, and so we're here today to basically just get you all approval because the letter will be coming from the board and not the health. Yes, so the letter will be coming from the board, but we wanted to get you all approval. So we sent out a draft for you all to review prior to this meeting. And so we're here today to see if you have any edits, suggestions, or if the board would like to approve that letter to go out to our elected officials or mayors. So yes, so if it's already went out, then there is nothing else the board needs to do at this time. Our next step would be, I think it's next on the agenda as discussing fee language. In the ordinance, that topic goes hand in hand, because while we have the authority to change the fees, or the ordinance, the Shelby County ordinance controls what we can actually do. And our representative from Take Our Aquifer, Ms. Sarah, has presented a draft that we are looking at, but overall, it does really communicate the things that we want to see as far as the health department, and we here today to get your suggestion on or your vote on whether or not we want to change the language. As it was mentioned during the comment hearing, now there is not there is language that suggests that speaks to the actual fee amount. And we think it's going to be very difficult. It doesn't really make sense to have to go back every time the board wants to make changes to the fees to ask commission to change the ordinance. So we would like to eliminate, the main goal is to eliminate that language so that we can make fees as an agency as needed, reasonable fees as needed. So just to make sure we understand, so you're saying that what Protect Our Aquifer has suggested is what the health department, you all agree for the changes to the ordinance? So they haven't had an opportunity to review, we just got it this week. So I don't want to speak directly for what the health department can actually agree to. But overall, we do have the same goal as far as updating the ordinance. The big picture is the ordinance is outdated. There are things that contradict what our rules say versus what the ordinance say. And I took a general look this morning, and for what I see, everything looks good. And we would like to go forward with a resolution before we actually, I think we suggested maybe having an official change by May of this year. So before May, we would actually go before commission and ask to update the ordinance. But so far, we have drafted language and we're still working to get it, so. Okay. So y'all don't have anything to present today as far as the ordinance language? No. Okay. What do we need to discuss then? If I do think the draft that we received from Ms. Houston is a good draft. So we want to kind of look over that today and see if that's a good starting point, or we can just come back during the next meeting when the county health department has also had an opportunity to look at it as well. Sarah, is there anything else you want to add outside of your public comment, just to make sure we have context for the ordinance that you're suggesting?
Sure, I mean, I think that.
Do you want to come up here?
Oh, sure. Yes, Sarah Houston, Protect Our Aquifer. As Council Raven Chandler just noted, we try to make really minimal changes. So if you want to just, kind of walk through that really briefly, you'll see on page 2, there's throughout the ordinance, we do remove Memphis in various parts, so that's a pretty, hopefully simple one. Page 3, there is this opportunity for y'all to create a groundwater protection plan, which has been attempted, and there's been some really great things that have happened like back in the 90s. Haven't really seen that since. So we did encourage the addition of every 5 years, just as kind of the same timeline that we would be reviewing fees. In clause 4 on that same page, you see the board shall have and exercise the power to review and set permit fees for groundwater and septic program. Again, just making things very clear so that the county commission knows where their charge stops and starts and where yours begins. And then on page 5, I didn't get into the weeds on this, but on page 5, you do see this number 10. It says the board shall have the power to hear and deny matters concerning requests for septic variance related to the 100-year floodplain restriction. Now, this language is specifically from the septic code, and so that's the only, there's 2 mentions of the groundwater board in the septic code. And so really y'all's authority there really relates to kind of a similar denial situation. So similar to a well denial, if someone were denied a septic, then they can request a variance, and that would in theory come before the board. So just had that clearly outlined in the ordinance. And then and 12, which they already do, but for the rules and regulations, it says to be kept on file in the minutes section of the county legislative department and shall be made available to the public via the health department's website, which they already do, but just to have that clear. And then the other only comment or suggested change is in that on page 7, which is removal of those 2 fees, and just make it very clear that the fees for the permits are set by this board and that they can be reviewed every 5 years. So those are the suggested changes. Those are things that we had discussed, with this board and with the staff over these past few months. So in order to go before county commission, it is an ordinance change, so it requires 3 readings. So it would be a minimum of a 6-week process. Minimum of a 6-week process. So we plan to help get that through that process. But we are, I think this probably whole department's ready to bring in a little more revenue, and we can't really start that process until all these kind of ducks are in a row. Okay, thank you. And I can stay for questions if you want.
Yeah, does anybody have questions for Protect Our Aquifer on their suggestions?
Yeah, so I guess overall big picture is if we can get you all's approval on whether or not you would like to go forward on actually making changes to the ordinance. And then, we can start working to actually draft an actual resolution to go before commission.
The vote that we took last time, that was not.
Yeah, so that was particularly for fees for, that was for you all's fees, but however, this ordinance only mentions 2 fees, and I believe it's the annual inspection fee. It doesn't mention the other one, so we don't have to go before the board on that.
And that's something I think we talked about as a next step after this approval and everything. Then the well code and the septic code have the full schedule of fees in that code, because right now there isn't really a formal location beyond just this fee schedule as a separate document. So having the well code and the septic code reflect that full schedule of fees, so it's all in one place. So these are just really housekeeping things we're trying to get in order to make things very clear for all parties involved.
Yeah, so any questions for Protect Our Aquifer before we take a vote? Okay. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Does anybody have any questions about moving this forward to an ordinance, just generally? or a resolution, you said? Okay. Sorry, clarify it for me again. So we need a resolution?
We would need a, resolution requesting that we change that we can change the ordinance. It'll be an ordinance, but it's different parts in this ordinance, so it'll be us going before the board to, commission to ask them to update the ordinance. So we would have to basically identify all the new language that we would want.
So we wouldn't just put forward the ordinance changes without a resolution?
Yes, so it would be exactly kind of what this is, but it'll also have additional language saying like, whereas we've had this for so long, it'll be additional language. So, but that's more of the legislative drafting part of it, but for you all, the purpose is to just determine whether or not you want to do this. Do you want to make the changes, or do you want to leave it alone? And that's a decision, I think needs to come from the board, whether you all support that before we move forward.
Okay, I think I understand. Okay, so if we are in support of changing, not these changes necessarily, but moving forward to make changes in the ordinance, the groundwater ordinance, or water quality control, I should say, say aye. Okay. Anyone not supportive, say no. Okay. We have support.
And I would like to suggest I do believe these are necessary because it's not that we're making substantial changes. It's really just, we're actually just trying to clarify, again, it is housekeeping, clarify things that have been outdated. So as of now, our fees will not be the same. They're contradicting if we don't update it. So it is recommended on our end, but if you all would like Tom to actually review this as well, we can definitely come back during the next meeting to actually vote on what needs to be changed.
Yeah, I think that was going to be my question, is if there will be a recommendation from the health department at the next meeting about what will change. Is that correct?
So what was shown by Sarah, those are the necessary changes. Ray and I, we discussed this, but we were gonna come today and just talk about the same changes that was shown, that was presented to you. And the reason, as you remember the fee increase presentation. So if we make this change in the ordinance, we don't have to keep coming, if we want to increase the fees in the next 5 to 10 years, we would have to keep doing this over and over, getting the fee increase, changing it in the ordinance. But if it states, if there's no fee listed in the ordinance, we don't have to continue to make changes in the ordinance. Does that make sense? So we're in support of the changes that were presented. We just, of course, need to move forward so we can have those changes made expeditiously.
I think one thing I failed to mention, the alternative to this is the fees that we mentioned during the last meeting. I don't know particularly what that fee was. It would really be just us going to the board, to the commission, and saying, hey, can we change this one fee? So it can be the same in both the code and in the ordinance. So
There
that's
would be a fee listed. We're not listing a fee. We're just gonna say that the fees, what the wording was, it wouldn't be an actual fee listed.
Yeah.
But we're gonna mention that every 5 years,
Yeah.
fees may.
So I was saying like the alternative, like if we don't change the language and we just change the ordinance, that one section in the ordinance that we, because we would need to do that in order for the fees that we mentioned, that was voted on during the last one to even be applicable. So that's the alternative. It won't be applicable someone can contest it and say, hey, the code of ordinance which controls says that the annual inspection fee is $10, but your fees on your website says 25. They would be able to use what the code of ordinance says. So that would be the alternative, is just changing it one fee. But we do recommend, instead of having to go every time the board wants to change a fee to the commission, is basically taking that language out. That was a big purpose of the change in the draft that was made. That was a big goal of it, is to basically take that out. And there is a review period that can also be discussed. Do you want it to be 5 years? Do you want it to be 2 years review period? So that's all, within your discretion if you do want to change it. So I would recommend taking a look at the actual changes, and we come back during the next meeting to discuss what makes sense for the board to change.
Okay. Any thoughts on that? Okay, that sounds good. Thank you so much. So we will come back the next meeting and discuss any thoughts that we have on the ordinance changes. Okay, is there any other business we need to discuss? Did you have something? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all so much.